everyone, welcome back. This is One Step Beyond, and I'm Aram Arslanian. Today's guest is someone I have wanted to have on the show for a super long time. I'm really delighted we have him here. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So, for the uninitiated, for the people who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Adam. I own a rock shop. My biggest thing I do is sell crystals and fossils, those pretty rocks you put on a shelf like this. That's my job. Sourcing them, selling them. I make jewelry. So as an artisan, that's how I started.
Heck yeah. All right, so what's the name of your shop?
Rubble Rock and Gem.
All right, and when did you found it?
I'd say 2018, early 2018 is when I started doing like a business with a proper location. I have my corporate tax years and all that, but having an actual brick and mortar and getting really into sales 2018.
Okay. So do you have any kind of business background like that of like a business owner prior to that?
No, I did a few months of business admin in university when I was like 18 years old right out of high school, but yeah, I just flunked out of that real fast. That's about. I learned a bit on Excel and remember maybe 2 terms, but yeah, I would say none, absolutely none, as far as business background.
So where did you grow up?
Vanderhoof.
Okay.
It's a small town in northern BC. 5,000 people up by Prince George. So went there for pretty much all my elementary, high school years. Got out of there as soon as possible, went to Kamloops, which was like the new big city, 90,000 people in British Columbia. I've lived in BC my entire life. So I went to Kamloops and then that was for school actually, what I just talked about there, flunked out. Had no direction in life, went backpacking for a while into US and just roamed around, literally went the direction the wind blew some days and spent months doing that. Came back, decided I wanted to save the polar bears because I found out about like different, gatherings, like the rainbow gathering stuff. And I met hippies. I'd never seen hippies before living up north. New age hippies, we'll call them. And they inspired me. They inspired my dreadlocks, my appearance, what you see now. I think mostly because like when I encountered them, they were the first people that kind of stood up to me in life. Like I'll always remember this moment of there was someone that was talking about palm oil and just like deforestation. And I made a joke about it as like an asinine teenager from small town, doesn't know any better would. And I got put in my place, and I think in a way it was like the first time someone really put me in my place, and I think I gained respect for that, I don't know what I'd call it, modality, personality after that. And I learned more about it, and so grew my hair out, went to school when I was maybe 22 for my first degree, environmental studies, wanting to, like I said, save the polar bears. Realized there was so much more to it, and finished the program, but yeah, anyway, long story short, it ended up with me going to school in Vancouver back then, and I've been here ever since. So about 10 years now, 11 years I've been in Vancouver.
All right, so I'm going to start with like an obvious question, but I got to know, like, when did you first get into rocks and like why? Like, what was the reason behind it?
Everyone always asks me that. So I can't answer it. And I think that's the beauty of that question because it's like the only thing in my life now. But when I was a kid, I just had an affinity towards them, right? So I was down by the creek collecting little pebbles. I'd tumble them, I'd sort them. I had really like a really curated display, but it was all sentimental rocks, nothing of value. Even like, we'd travel sometimes as a family and we'd stop at a flea market and I'd be there like digging through the little rock bins of the flea market vendors and I'd spend half an hour to pick the $3 rock, but the perfect one for my collection. So I was more into them than most kids back then. And it's one of those things where like as an adult, I can weigh the pros and cons of all the decisions I make. And I understand the reasoning of why I partake in certain things. As a kid, I don't know why I liked rocks, just always did. I hit puberty and I stopped caring about rocks. So it wasn't until I got to Vancouver, a girlfriend was making fun of me because my apartment was just barren. Like I had my backpacker days where like again everything was just minimalist. Like I got rid of like I didn't have a phone or anything, no watch, because I'm like, oh, there's clocks all around me in the world. What do I need a clock for? Any of that. And, so I had almost nothing. And so when I moved into an apartment, I slept on my sleeping bag on the ground for probably the first month until like, like I was just super minimalist. Anyway, I had to decorate my apartment. I went to a rock shop to like add some fossils to the apartment because I was like, oh, as a kid, I liked fossils. So added that. And when I was at one of the rock stores in town, I overheard them talking about a rock club you could join and they'd take you out digging. And as a kid, I always wanted to go dig, but like any parents, my parents didn't know where to take me, right? Like where are rocks, right? So when I heard I could join the club, it kind of like sparked this, I guess, childhood like want to go search for rocks that I never got to fulfill. Join the club, and from there it just like snowballed into what I am today.
That's amazing. So you did environmental science as your first degree, is that correct?
Yes.
And so you finished that, and then what?
So I went for environmental studies, like I said, wanting to save the polar bears, and I got highest GPA in my program. I was doing all kinds of volunteer work on the side, and it was tough too because I'd meet all these other kids in the program, and I'd say, oh, you can go like hang out on a Greenpeace boat this weekend. It's in the harbor, right? And so I'd go volunteer on Greenpeace boats, or I did like local NGOs too, like pulling weeds in some of the local parks, or all kinds of things, just different events, volunteering at like waste and recycling management, like zero waste events. So I did so many things, like volunteer the year with 2 different organizations, like just putting hours in. Because it was like my extracurricular for my studies. I figured, oh, if I'm going to get a job, I have to show I'm interested, blah, blah. So I was doing all these things, and it led to leadership summits. I got to travel across Canada for different paid I'll call them adventures, basically summits, things like that. And got to meet cool people, go through different trainings. I finished environmental studies, but during environmental studies, my favorite electives were philosophy. Like, I don't know why, it just tore my head apart and put it back together again. As a high school kid, like you get stoned or drunk with your buddies and you think, what is time, man? And all your buddies try and figure it out. And then you read like some of the most accredited papers over the last 2,000 years on time, and you go, this is a better answer than any of theirs or mine, right? It's cool because it addressed a lot of life's questions, and like I was smart enough to know this is not going to help me get a job, right? But I enjoyed it because it gave me conclusions into questions that I think a lot of us never really answer, like religion, right? Like my parents were half into Catholicism, especially when they divorced, right? Looking for meaning. I got dragged along to church with them, but like there's all these questions where I didn't think God exists, but I never really fully accepted it as an atheist. And I'm not like a practicing atheist or anything. I just don't think there's a God, right? But for me, addressing all these philosophy questions helped me address those things. How I want to treat other people, right? You get into ethics of how I want to treat myself. And you look at community standards versus legality. There's all kinds of other questions about metaphysics, like, behind this wall, does everything even exist? Or does it just become existent when I walk around and look at it, right? Like there's all kinds of questions that are fun to answer, and you learn to argue a lot. Everyone says, oh, philosophers learn how to argue, but I also learned how to get along too, because I spent another 2 years, that was an associate's degree to finish the philosophy program. And you spend day in, day out arguing with the other students. The teachers are really good where they'll kind of pose an open-ended question, and then they just let the students argue and teach themselves. And then the teacher comes in at the end with kind of like the best answers, and you kind of take them all as a grain of salt, right? But it was great because you argue, and then you eventually just learn like to mess with people while they're arguing with you, or you learn, oh, this isn't worth me arguing, or sometimes you argue to be the devil's advocate or whatever it is, but you learn, I guess maybe my opinions don't matter unless the situation is dire, I would say, I guess. Like if you're just in a classroom arguing, you can kind of say whatever you want, and philosophy, like I said, it gave me a sense of alignment with self, replace religion or belief system or any of that. And it gave me a surety and, logical fallacies when I argue with a partner over something or just try and get along with a partner. I understand when they're not making sense, when people are lying to me at work as an employer, or I have to confront an employee about something and try to be fair and discipline them. I can look at the ethical standards of how I want to do this and also think to myself, am I being a fair person or am I just reacting? So it gave me a lot of value for how I want to live my life. And that's why I invested in it. Like I said, wasn't going to get a job out of it, but as I was doing those electives, I just knew I wanted to do more of them. So actually, while I was in environmental studies, I took electives of philosophy that had no application to my first degree. But by the time I finished, I was like, I wonder how many more classes I need. And so I just took the extra classes and finished the degree. And then I actually went into fine arts because while I was going to school, I was learning how to make jewelry, and so I liked jewelry because it was stone and metal and it was fabrication, right? Like drawing was too 2D for me, but the fabrication of building something, solving a puzzle while you do it, how do I make this work? You get an idea in your head and you got to build it. I liked that, but I wanted to do it bigger scale, so I wanted to go into sculpture, and so I tried fine arts, and I ended up becoming a black sheep in that program. I think I'd been in school too long, and I was only like 24, but I definitely challenged the teachers a bit because I felt like I wasn't getting my money's worth. And so I kind of got pushed out of the program, and I was okay for that because as I was in fine arts, everything I loved about art that I was taking on the side, like I would wake up at 7 a.m. every Saturday to take a bus to a silversmithing class, right? Every Saturday I was there, I was like learning wire wrapping. If I went anywhere, I had like tools with me on the bus, I'd be wire wrapping. Like I remember using the posts on the bus as a mandrel to bend a ring band around. Like I was always making art and I loved it. I was passionate about it. I was like romantic artist, kind of early 20s. And when I went to art school, it killed the art in me, that passion. And I'd ask all the other students, do you still like do art at home? Are you enjoying this? And it's kind of this thought of like, oh, you have to do this. Like, this is what the program is and you'll be better for it after. And as soon as I left that art program, about 2 weeks after, I started loving art again. Because like I started making things at home that weren't projects that I just had to do that I wasn't interested in. And I got to guide myself again. And I renewed that love of art. But that's kind of my school progress there.
So you joined this, was it a rock digging club?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you did that and you're going in school the whole time. That love for rock digging and being a part of it, because you ended up joining like the board of directors for that club, right? Or you were the president?
Board of directors. Yeah, I redlined myself a lot in my youth. I just found the extra energy that sometimes I don't have anymore. Like still now I work every day and I feel guilty if I don't work 12 hours a day. Like even last night I was up till 1 at my shop working, right? And I love it. Like I would rather do that than go on a vacation anywhere. Like I go to all these other countries. I'd rather be in a basement shop of some random like workhouse somewhere than be out seeing the views or any of the architecture or something. So I redlined myself and I joined this rock club and I got really involved. I was probably there 3 days a week on top of going to school. Because of the long transit ride to get there, I could read my textbooks or I could take on additional books about the trade, the silversmithing or stone cutting.
And why those two? Like what got you into that specifically?
Process of elimination. So I did this yes man stage of my life when I was younger, where I just tried all kinds of things.
So you just say yes to everything.
Yeah, I didn't like watching TV. I was trying to be aversive to that. And like, obviously, like I'm not going to stick my hand in a machine and if someone tells me, right? Like as long as it was safe. But yeah, I thought like making jewelry was girly, the silversmithing classes when I started that. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And I ended up loving it, right? But the stone cutting stuff, it was just a calling. I enjoyed it. I talked to different girls about this. I sometimes enjoyed grinding rocks more than sex with girls, and I'd say that to them because grinding rocks, I don't know, something about it. It was my meditation. I could go there. I could be in my own thoughts and just something about it. It was like, it wasn't erotic for me, but I just enjoyed it so much. I was so engaged in it that there's other things I tried in my life, like it was a phase or I was doing it with other people or I just didn't enjoy it that much. But stone cutting I wanted to do when I was alone. And that's kind of one of those things, like whatever you do alone defines you kind of things. Rock cutting was one of those ones where I just I'd walk down the street and I'd be thinking of what I wanted to make next, right? And so it consumed me, right? And so I just got more and more engaged with it. And the club was volunteer led, so that's why I joined the board of directors, right? They're always asking for volunteers. And so I learned all kinds of things about like the Roberts rules, past old business, new business, going over finances. So I did that. I went on rock camp, like digging stones with other people. And it's a lot of retirees that do that. Same thing, like when I was talking about environmental studies, I'd ask all these other kids to join me at these environmental kind of just NGO like volunteer events. No one would ever show up, right? And then same with the rock stuff. People would see what I made in school because I was wearing it everywhere, right? Like 10 rings on every finger. I was making things that like attached to my pockets, like money clip style. I had pendants, like just all kinds of creative stuff. People thought it was so cool. And it actually led me into like modeling, like years of modeling because people have thought I had a unique look. But anyways, making stuff, no one else ever showed up that was my age. They just never found the time for it. Cutting a stone takes a long time. Like polishing wood or sanding wood, like wood is soft or any other material, clay to sculpt it. But stones are hard. Like gemstones that we cut for jewelry, it's harder than steel. So imagine I give you a block of steel and I say, okay, make that into something, right? It's sanding, polishing, and having good craftsmanship. It's definitely a task that takes patience. And I don't know if that, like, maybe that's me being like, oh, the youth doesn't have patience, but it does take that and discipline to learn it and become good at it. It's not something you can do over a weekend and be like, oh, I know how to do this. It takes time, right? It's a trade. And yeah, so most of the people there are retirees that have kind of finished their job and just looking for something to do with their spare time, or I guess all their time. And so I got to learn a lot from like my peers stopped being people my age, especially because like I ceased drinking when I was 19. Like when I did my backpacking and everything, I'd stopped before then. So I didn't like partying anymore. And so I kind of,
What about drugs?
no, not since I was 19.
So
Yeah, high school like anyone,
you've been
but
totally sober. You don't drink. You don't do drugs.
sometimes I have a chocolate with liqueur flavor in it. But other than that, yeah.
Good for you.
No, I have no reason to ever go back to it. Like people can drink around me, smoke around me. I don't have the urge to do it. I also don't have the urge to tell them not to anymore, right? Like I'm just entirely over it. I know it's good for me. They have their own life to live. It's not my, I don't know. They can do what they want, be happy. I do what I want, be happy, you know? And but yeah, I'm just entirely done with that stuff. And that's part of like why I did this Yes Man stage, because I'm like looking for all these new things to engage with in life that are proactive and healthy. And so I tried sports, I tried all kinds of art stuff, but it landed on the rock stuff. I really enjoyed, and I kept going back to it. And through investments throughout the years, like, you know, I'd start buying tools for at home, and as I'm buying more rock to work with or more expensive rock sometimes, I'd ask myself like, do I want to keep spending money on this? Like, is it a phase? Am I going to sell this on Craigslist for $200? Like the hockey stick that I bought for floor hockey, or the basketball that I'm no longer using because I stopped doing drop-in basketball, that like through my Yes Man stage of trying these new things that were just like there that I'd posted on Craigslist. I'm like, is this a phase? But it got to a point where I realized like, no, like I really love this. I enjoy the peers. And that's one thing too, is like, I think because my peers changed and I was surrounded by people that were a lot older that became mentors in a way, not really like for my personal life, but just like they were very helpful and guiding. And they just wanted to see me succeed. They weren't competing in business or anything. They had all this knowledge and no one to really give it to. Like I said, all retirees. So all I had to do was show up and people would help me and train me and show me. And so it was a big help when I started. And it also gave me a sense of, you call it not family, but a sense of belonging, right? And especially as I got better at stone cutting, like a sense of reverence and pride in what I did. Because when I stopped drinking and partying, like I didn't want to go to people's birthday parties that I knew in school, right? And so it alienated me. I kind of alienated myself, and it also ostracized me when people would talk about what they did on the weekend, and I'd be like, "Oh, I was out at this beach pulling plants, or I was out getting signatures to save caribou in the rainforest." And they go, "Oh, well, I drank a whole 2-6." And you know, like when you're in school, it's just so I got divided from I think my general age group, and that's kind of allowed me also to have focus in what I've done and build my business so much because I don't have too many distractions.
When I listen to your story, so much of it, like, you know, wasn't into TV, um, didn't drink or do drugs past a certain age. And like I like you using that term red line. It's like I was constantly involved with something. It's like this burning desire to be involved in life.
Mhm.
Where did that come from?
If you want to get super deep, avoidance of other things. So we can go as deep as we want here. You can post this and everything. So when I was younger, like maybe, I don't know, 14 or so, first time I had sex, I got an STI. screwed me up with sex for my younger years. And it was one I thought I had it for life, right? And I've told this story to enough people, it's fine. So basically, I went a lot of my years abstaining from intimacy with people, right? And whether that be just anyone, like, you know, you get to a certain point, like when you're interacting with a girl and everything's going great, and then you kind of have to like make a move or push to the next limit, I would always shy away. And because of that, in my youth, I found things that were excitable in other ways. So drugs, crime, nothing that like is unforgivable, right? Like, thankfully. But yeah, I was a teenager without much guidance, much direction, just kind of like the giving up on life thing and just not caring about myself, the people around me. And so at a certain point, it all caved in on itself when I was maybe like 18 or so, before I went backpacking. I realized, you know, like I was unhappy to the point of like like I didn't like try suicide or anything, but I was just super unhappy to the point where either like my life goes that direction or not. And so I chose not. And that was part of me getting a backpack, was just running away from everything I knew and just trying something fresh. And that's why I went the direction the wind blew, right? Because I was just didn't have guidance, looking for anything other than what I had been a part in. And and it's pretty cool. The more I acknowledged the lies I'd told myself, other people, and forgave myself for them and discussed them with other people, the more doors open in my life, and swiftly. And I think the pace at which all those metaphysical doors open is what really caused me to appreciate what healthy living is, or just positive and, you know, being a good person. Like, I realized the value in that. You could sum it up in phrases like you get more bees with honey than vinegar, like all those kinds of things. It changed me when I saw how much more receptive people were of who I was, how much more stress I didn't have to have when I was in my head justifying things. Like, so I think that was part of me just growing up too, in general. Eventually I confronted the whole STI thing. It ended up just being genital warts, but when I was younger and looking on the internet at 14, I thought it was a lifelong thing. So there I was, I actually avoided intimacy for something that goes away after a year and a half, right? But I spent a decade of my life avoiding it, and a big part of
And you avoided intimacy that whole time as
yeah, I
well.
probably could, by the time I was 24, I could count the amount of people I had on two hands, or like that I'd had sex with, and probably even the amount of times, right? Because I just really avoided it. But long story short, part of me like trying to resolve my life and become someone that was attractive to people, you know, like I didn't know back then what really was a problem. Like I didn't realize it was me avoiding intimacy, but I wanted to become attractive, so I wanted to become interesting and fun to talk to, and whatever, good looking, or like I think just more the interesting man in the room, and engaging. So I spent a lot of effort on that, right? That's why I wanted to engage in things to become an interesting person for others. So that's why I started. Now I do all these things for myself more than other people. I realized like that's why I continue to do them. But one of the big things that drove me, and when I talk about the redlining myself, I'll give context to this, is I stopped masturbating when I was younger, like when I was maybe 19, 20. And that caused me to like lethargy, and all kinds of things went away. My motivation increased. I had so much stress and no way to absolve myself of it. Like I couldn't go drink, stare into a glass. I couldn't, again, just lay back and like have a chemical release. I had to resolve things in a way that was sometimes mentally excruciatingly painful, because I had to deal with them in the best way. And so I think the abstaining from masturbating is a big part of what caused me to go out and do other things. Because again, it's a taboo subject, but I would be at home sometimes horny, and it was like, no, I don't want to do this. I'll find anything else to do. Sometimes just getting up, getting a glass of water, because I knew water was healthy. Sometimes it was going for a run. Sometimes it was going joining a team, like distractions, right? And that's kind of like, you call it a yes man phase or anything else, but distractions. Same way people, I think, would get over depression, right? Is just distract yourself from it until you don't realize you're depressed anymore, right? Probably why I'm a workaholic too, is I just distract myself from everything by being workaholic. But I think it's healthy because I do genuinely enjoy it. It doesn't take me away from anything else. It's what I want to do. Hopefully that gives some context and some direct answer as to why I get into all these other things.
It does. And also it's like, A, like, thank you for sharing. And B, it's like, there's very few really driven people like that really engage in life that I know that haven't had some kind of like pretty significant like trauma when they were younger. And it could go again, but something from like small T trauma to a big T trauma. Most people I know who are like driven and really engaged in life have had something. And they kind of resolve that through like wrestling with life a little bit. And I think everything you shared there. The interesting thing is like that kind of like I'm staying at home. I'm abstaining for everything. I'm not having sex. I'm not doing any of the other things. I'm not drinking anything like that. You have no sexual release either with a partner or on your own. You're not drinking. You're not smoking. You're not doing drugs. You're not watching TV. So there's nothing else for that energy except for to
I
create.
got into emotional states where I had to find a thesaurus to figure out the word of what I was feeling. Like it was amazing how my endocrine system changed and reset because I'd have frustrations or elations, right? And they were to such an extent that I hadn't felt before that I had to like sometimes it take days of that feeling for me to finally summarize the word of it, right? But um, it was addicting in a whole new way. And I'll clarify. I definitely wanted to get laid with other people. I just didn't want to have it alone.
Right, right. Okay, so
But
you're not in the stage where you're celibate anymore.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was like after you'd stopped being celibate and you moved back into engaging like that. That's where you started abstaining in the other way.
I started abstaining from masturbation initially because I thought maybe that was a reason girls weren't attracted to me, or like as I was trying to become attractive to the opposite sex, I was like, what can I do? All these different things, and I was like, well, if I stop masturbating, the only way I get a release is being with a girl, right? So not only do my own hormones push me to go out and talk to more people, but it's like if I want to have that release, I have to work for it, right? And it's one of those things where it was so valuable because I learned the value of engaging with women, right? Like I came again from like I was still young enough to just kind of be like I wasn't ever like like a sexist or major like objectifying people, but I think having that push to engage with women, I learned there was so much more and on a deeper level. Because again, I'd avoided intimacy until that point, like in a deeper, meaningful way. So I think I really gained so much from it just by like talking to girls. Like most of me getting over all my issues and stuff, it wasn't counselors or anything like that. It was just random girlfriends listening to me, you know? And so it gave me a lot of appreciation and like I wish to never ever objectify a woman. Like more than anything, I was to personify them, you know, like it added so much value because there you get all this stress and tension of like, you know, like my hormones building up. But like obviously there's consent and you learn like consent isn't just permission. You want both people to be excited about it, right? So that's where, you know, I had to be engaging and stuff. And it's I learned so much from it. I don't know how to summarize that, but yeah.
It's interesting how having like a sense of discipline about whether it's like drinking, like what you put into your body or what you do with your body, and these things. Uh, no judgment call. People can do whatever they want. I subscribe much to the same kind of philosophy of the like I know what's good, what I want to do, but like I don't really care what anyone else does. They can do it. I would say not drinking, not doing drugs, for me has been I couldn't have done the stuff I've done if I was drinking. No way, I wouldn't be alive for sure. Those two things, but also like I have like a pretty regimented schedule. Like I'm like really I do the podcast, I run a business, I have a family, I play in bands, like I try and take good care of myself. So again, I like that term redline because I've always been like that ever since I was very lazy when I was young until I had pretty significant trauma. And after that, I was never lazy again. And then I was like on it. I have to have a real discipline of how I run my life to be able to do stuff. And one of my friends is like, your life stresses me out from the sidelines, man. He's like, I don't know how you do all this stuff. Like, I do all this stuff because I'm like super into all of it. I don't do things I don't like doing. I only do things I like doing. And it doesn't mean that they're not hard because most of them are extremely hard to do. But I like the challenge. I like doing a good job. I like being precise. All that requires a crazy amount of discipline. And that means I can't have distractions. I can't have toxic relationships. I can't have people around me who make me feel anxious. I can't be indulgent with where I spend my time. And also being like a great partner and father is super important, and son. So like I have to schedule in time for that. all of it's about discipline. And I think discipline for everyone means different things, but discipline is it unlocks so many other things. Where discipline sounds like it's a restrictive practice, for me, it's been like an elevating practice.
Yeah, it's definitely guiding. I think I like I have reward and punishment some systems for myself, like how a parent would impose go to your room or something. Like I've had times like if I do something that I'm not proud of myself of, I'll go give $100 to the person I hate most in life to help reinforce that like I don't want to do that again, right? Because now it's helping someone that I don't like. There's all kinds of ways to reinforce that discipline system. As far as regimented schedule, I don't write anything down really. I don't use Google Calendar, but I have my routine, right? So like I wake up and it's like business. Like I don't have the distractions, or I don't have family. I don't really have friends. I argue with girlfriends about that all the time. Like, why don't you have friends? And I go, well, I have colleagues and I have people that I meet in passing that I enjoy my time with. But otherwise, my work keeps me happy. It's my baby. As I learn about how to look after it and foster it and grow it, that's where I want to spend my time, because I love it so much too. Anyone can work any job, and there's always bad days, there's good days. This morning, I was dealing with cops on the phone because of shoplifting. I have to fire people sometimes. Things break in my store. Someone will come in and break a $2,000 item, and I got to figure out how to resolve this, whether I charge it, like all kinds of things, right? Charge them financially. Like my job as like a business owner and like the boss is to deal with all the problems that fall in between the cracks of what I've employed my employees to do, right? They have their standard operating procedures, and like anything that goes beyond them is my responsibility. So I wake up putting out fires, right? My shipping person forgot to put something in a shipment, or things broke, and I wake up and I check the emails and I go, oh, putting out this fire for the person that's angry about that shipment, right? And so every job has good things, bad things about it, but because I love this, all those mountains are just molehills to me, right? Like I'm so tunnel vision on what I want to achieve out of this that they're all just like I don't really notice them. It's just part of what I do, right? And for me to get to make all my dreams come true, which are mass producing my jewelry on an even bigger scale and distributing it on a big scale too, I have to um, my business would plateau without employees. It would plateau without me having the financial sustainability from multiple incomes of various, like my hand is in various pies of this business, right? Fossils, jewelry already, manufacture. I cut stones for other people overseas, just selling the crystals, right? I have art studios. I have about 20 art studios now that I sublease to other people because of my previous storefront, my previous lease responsibility. And so without all of that, I would just be a hobby artist. And so I have to take on all those challenges, but it's also fun for me. Like this morning, the thoughts going through my head, because I work late at night, right? At my shop, sometimes till 2 a.m. I've had my vehicle broken into 7 times this year, right? Windows smashed, got to deal with the glass cleanup. I got to learn about, okay, how do I prevent this with sensors and everything? Other than waiting with a baseball bat outside, right? How do I prevent this? Shoplifting, I'm learning, okay, cops, even if I have footage of them stealing stuff, it's not worth anything to police. So loss prevention, what is financially worth engaging in? But what I'm talking about is the challenges. When I first started my business, it was how to stay afloat, how to generate more revenue than expenses, right? And then next year it was how to deal with all those expenses and sorting them, the accounting, and just general business admin, filing things away, invoice system, because someone, they buy something but then they don't pick it up for 6 months and be like, oh, did you pay me for that? Having logistics, right? And so that was kind of my second year. Third year was I started getting employees, and I started with my best friend, which don't ever employ your friends. And then I went into hiring people, and then you start having to fire people, right? And doing that in legal ways and making sure that I'm covered when I do it. And then so now I've got employees that are hanging around for a while. How do I make them stay around, right? Incentives in forms that are not financial, because maybe I don't have enough money to give them all $60 an hour or something, right? For a minimum wage based job. So it's how do I keep them happy here? So workplace culture, things like that. And again, discipline. While I'm still the main boss, I don't have HR department. So I got to discipline someone and then hang out with them for the rest of the day, right? And that's where like philosophy comes in. Which problems do I feel like bringing up, and which do I want to just let go, right? What's worth me creating confrontation in the workplace? Other employees come to me with issues. So and so said this, so I have to resolve it, right? Like I said, it's a lot like my child. I got to look after it and deal with all these different things. So now, this morning I'm on the phone with cops and I'm realizing I think this year I'm learning about safety and security, right, for my employees and things like that. Parents pulling up with kids at the backloading dock area, or my employees have to go home at late, sometimes alone, right? They're locking up, and if there's things like that, it can be scary for some people, right? Women, male alike. So in my head, I go, okay, these are my new challenges this year. I gotta maybe sign up for a loss prevention class, or I'll go talk to the local community police and get advice. Like, so all these things go with owning the business. And yeah, my dream world, I could just make things and I could just go pick any random material and take any machines, but machines cost money and stones cost money and having a place to do it. And so I have to fund it all. And by having these businesses, I'm able to do that. I watch a lot of other people do what I do, and they're starving artists because either they lack the drive we talk about, that redlining thing, or they don't want it as much, right? Like, I don't want money in life. Like, we can go look at my car out back. It's just a beater car, right? Like, I'm rock rich and I like investing in my business, but my home is minimalist, like everything that matters to me is a business. I don't want money. I make jewelry, not wearing any, I got gold laying all around in my studio. I don't feel the need to wear it. I want to do something with my life that only hard work can attain. I don't want to do something that I can buy into or that money can buy. I want to achieve that because like that emotional distance, or I would say like mental distance, that spread of where I was to who I can become, and dealing with logistics like of orders that are, I want to make orders of 200,000 pieces or 20,000 pieces for different stores, right? And I want to get to that point and have to deal with those kinds of things and the frustrations that come with that and resolve them, because it builds character, right? Like anything I learn in the workplace, like I said, disciplining my employees. When I'm in a relationship, same thing. Do I want to argue with this over my partner? Do I not want to? So all those things that I take from my workplace or even from my relationships, they're all cross-connected, So yeah, I think it just helps me become a better person. That's kind of why I want to do it. Yeah.
Well, let's go to becoming a business. So you'd said to me before we'd started, we were talking about like you deal with, or at least interact with, gems that are worth serious money, and you have access to things that someone who's like, the idea of like being a rock collector or a gem collector or something they have on your table is kind of like what a neophyte would be into. It just looks good. You have an expertise and an access to a world that few of us even know exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was the gateway from being kind of a hobbyist artist and creating things to being like, oh, I'm going to get into this deeper world and learn about it and really start interacting with it? What was the gateway for that?
I was making art for probably 4 or 5 years.
And what did, by the way, just sorry to interrupt, what had happened? You finished your degrees and you went to that fine art program, but then ended up leaving.
So I would have been about 24 at the time, and I've been making stuff for maybe 3 years now, 2 years now, something like that. It was 25 when I left school. So I took a job that was like not a passionate job, just a job to make money. Actually, when I got out of school right away, like I got hired as soon as I graduated from environmental studies. I got hired that day from a company, but it wasn't fulfilling. It was like waste management. And in my head, I was like, I didn't go to university to become a glorified garbage man, nothing against it, just not what I wanted to do. And so I continue with school and work at the same time. I eventually like taught kids bike safety as that job that I didn't really want to do. And then like I was making money from it, but at some point I was just kind of like struggling. My father passed away, and I got inheritance. And so I think that was a real testament to like I was doing what I wanted to do, because I didn't change anything in my life. I just did what I loved more fully. So I took the inheritance, which wasn't that much. It was a decent amount, but not that much. And I couldn't buy a house with it or anything, right? So I went to India and I bought a bunch of stones there. And before I went to India, about a year before, I'd started sending parcels of stones overseas and getting them back. And it was expensive, right? It was like like the cutting costs, by the time I paid for shipping and everything, it was expensive. And I knew like if I just went to one of these cutting capitals in the world, I could probably get cutting to happen cheaper. Because at this point in my hobby, it's still a hobby, I'd amassed so much stone that like even in like 5 lifetimes, I wouldn't be able to cut it all. I was out digging stone. I was buying it at gem shows, local gem shows back then. But and estates, someone would pass away and I could go buy their rock collection for $200 because, someone would be like, I just want my garage back and all the rocks have been in here for 10 years. So it was very cheap to buy estates sometimes. And so I had all this stone and I had a machine shop in my apartment, right? Like my landlord hated me. I got rid of my couches and everything, like didn't have anywhere to sit except my bedroom. So it was just like nonstop machines. I was like getting in trouble for making noise, but I went to India with some money. I bought some rocks there and I started seeing the production side. Like I went there to try and get rocks cut and it was like, hey, I'm Adam. I have this backpack full of rocks. Will you cut it for me? Like that's literally how it started. I read an article online, but there really wasn't much about mass production. So I just bought a plane ticket, went there and figured it out. I spent 2 months there, like meeting all these people, going into stores. What I had read online that it was 3 million people, half of them in the gem and jewelry industry.
In which city?
Jaipur in Rajasthan in India. So I figured it's probably got the infrastructure, right? So I just went there, figured it out, and that's how I started to meet the cutters that work for me now. And when I go there to mass produce my jewelry still, I'll just subcontract a factory and have a whole team, and we'll crank out like thousands of pieces in a probably a week, sometimes 2 weeks. So I went there, I bought a bunch of stones, came back. And at this point I'd started doing flea markets too. Because as you're making things as a hobbyist and making them consistently like I had like 100 rings at home. And back then I'd wear them on every finger. And like I said, jewelry everywhere. But like I couldn't just keep adding to this bowl of rings at home. So I was so aversive to business when I started. I really didn't want to do it. I thought it would ruin the passion for me. And at the beginning it did, because it was frustrating when I'd put all the work into like setting up a table at a craft show or something and I'd like not sell anything. Some days I wouldn't sell anything. Sometimes I'd make $200. It kind of was like not fun. Business wasn't fun. I did it a bit more and I went to India, I bought some stuff, I came back and the stuff I sold, I made more money in the next trade show I did, more money in that trade show than I made in any other show in my life. And it was only $4,000 I made, but I was like when you're broke artist, you're like, wow, that's a lot. That's my rent and everything for the month, right? In one day. So that got me hooked. And I took the rest of the inheritance I had through a series of figuring out where I wanted to go. I ended up renting a warehouse. And so I subdivided the whole back of the warehouse to help cover the rent because I had enough for deposit and some minor renovations, and that was it. So when I got the warehouse, I got it so that I could have a workshop because I wanted to like make more things, be creative, make my jewelry and like go back to India and make more of it. So I got a space where I could move all those machines out of my apartment and make more noise, experiment, use dangerous chemicals, sandblasters, things that I definitely couldn't do in an apartment, bigger rock saws that make a lot of noise. When I got the warehouse, there was this old office space in the front and it had windows, there was some parking there. And I was like, oh, I guess, I could like make this a rock shop, and if people want to come buy things, I'll just come to the front and play shopkeeper. And I did. Like in the beginning, I'd come out with my apron that I use because everything's like being cut with water and stuff, and I get splashed all the time. So I'd have an apron on and then come to the storefront and help people. And all I had back then was like rough cutting grade rock. And like when I bought estates, some like really crappy crystals, people would come in and say, do you have crystals? Like, what about crystals? Your rock shop, where are the crystals? Any more, like, are you going to get crystals? Over and over. So I went to trade show in Denver. I hadn't been to Tucson yet. I went to Denver Gem Show. I filled my car. I probably spent like $10,000 there and filled my whole car full of rocks, drove all the way there, drove all the way back with them. And I sold so many of them right away, and it like got me hooked. And then I started going to more of these trade shows, Tucson in Arizona, Quartzsite in Arizona. Like last year I was in Munich in Germany. I've been to Thailand now for cutting stuff, but I started traveling more and more. And at those trade shows, like the biggest gem shows in the world, I would network with people. So sometimes I could order from them too, and they'd ship me things throughout the year. So then I started buying more and more, and I realized, well, I can't fit all this in my car, and I had to learn about palletizing and less than truckload. Now I know about like full truckload, like I bought semi trucks worth. I just started buying more and more, and because again, like I just had my same old apartment and I don't have family to look after, like no expenses other than me, and I don't drink and I don't have habits that cost a lot of money. Any money I made from selling the rocks, I just reinvested, right? And I just kept building it, and it just kind of grew from there. But that's kind of the hook, is like when people just started buying crystals. And to be honest, I was never into crystals when I got into it. Other, like, the customers were, and like it doesn't take a smart businessman to be like, whatever the customers want, I'll go get, right? It's what they want, not what I want. I really didn't get hooked on mineralogy and learning about crystals until I went to, it was the first time I went to the Tucson show. I stayed for the end show. Tucson is this massive event. It attracts like 500,000 people in the span of a month. It started with one show, I don't know, 80 years ago, 60 years ago, like one venue, and it's grown to about 80 venues now, like different show promoters. And people are like, well, why would I pay the rent on a venue? I'll just get my own warehouse. So the city's full of warehouses. The storage locker spaces in that city are rented out. So you go there and all the storage locker gates are open. It's just like filled with cabinets, and you go through those places. Like, there's more than 80 venues when you think about it, right? So it's just so much rock. But I went to this one show where it was, I can't remember the theme of it, but there was maybe like think of a gymnasium size or bigger of specimens that were all very, very expensive. And like the cheapest one there was like maybe that big, and it was like 30,000 US. And they had like armed security all around. And there was specimens that were $500,000, $1 million. And I went to this show, and that was the first time I'd seen minerals in a light where I was like, oh, these are like nice. Like, this is like you can't, there's no denying how pretty this is, right? Like, when you're going to spend $1 million or $500,000 on a rock, it's probably pretty nice, right? Like, so that was like when I got what we call the rock bug, right? Where I was hooked, and I started getting into the hobby of collecting minerals myself. So then I'd go to more shows, and I found different venues where you could go into a room like the size we're in now, and there'd be 3 million or more, $5 million worth of minerals in this room. And then you'd walk next door, and the next room would have $10 million worth. And like specimens there were world class, right? Like, where you look at it, it's like I work hard, my business is growing fast, but this has to be family money. Like, I don't know how they afforded all this, right? Because tanzanite's like this big, and like, you know, those crystals you see on Instagram that get millions of views, well, these ones are better, right? Like, so I got to see all these kinds of things. If you ever go to Tucson, Mineral City, that's one you got to go to. Hard Rock Summit in Denver, that's a new one that started, another venue there. So I got to go to these places and see those things. Same with like the India. I kept going back to India. And as I got to know people, like, I'd sit in the factories all day long, and sometimes stonecutters would come in to like try and sell the factory stones. And sometimes, because I knew the owners, they'd say, hey, Adam, come look at this rock. And someone would, like, out of their pocket just unwrap like $100,000 emerald or something, right? Like, giant and beautiful, glowing, like, and I'd be like, how much does that cost? And they'd write down the number in rupees, and I'd do the conversion. Like, so like, I've seen a lot of cool rocks. I don't own $1 million crystals. Maybe one day, you never know. I've gotten known in the rock world when I go down there. There's only so many Canadians that go to the US shows. And because of my buying power now, like when I go now, I'm 6 figures plus. So you start to get noticed. Like, I've had times where I go, okay, I like all this. Like, how much for your whole booth? Or I'll buy all these tables, right? And so it's fun. Like, it's a pretty fun flex. And like, I wish in high school someone could have told me like I could make a job out of going on shopping trips. Like, no one said you could go just spend like $100,000 on a shopping trip and it be part of business. And the write-off isn't the fun part, right? It's just the fact that, like, you know, I go there and like, you're flicking through, like, you know, like, even my employees, sometimes I come back from the bank before, I'm like, have you ever held, you know, X amount of money? And they go, what? Like, so it's fun. It definitely, it's also sometimes scary because the bank's like, are you sure you're getting back to your car okay? And like, but normally people wouldn't guess that I would be spending that money, right? So I can usually get away with it at the trade shows, and I spend it all in like the first 3 days too, right? And then I'm going into visas and everything next, right? But yeah, I'm known there because I buy bulk for my store, and also, like, you know, throughout, like I talked about, when I was just making things as a hobby, and I was like, am I going to turn around and sell these few machines on Craigslist? Like, if you see my machine shop now, like, I'm invested in it, not only in my machine shop, but my storefront. Like, there's no way I can just get out of the business at this point. It's an addiction. It's my livelihood. It's my calling, you know, it's my passion, all these things.
I am not even based in the level of knowledge about gems, rocks, minerals, anything. I have no knowledge of them outside of, like, I know what I like, what looks nice. You know, I have a partner who I love and appreciate, and who loves gems. And so I will buy things for her from your shop or other shops, but I know very little about it. One of the things that I know only through popular culture and a little bit through politics, global politics, concerns around mining practices for the environment, but also for populations within countries where, like, stones or gems could be coming from. So how have you worked on that? Because I know you're a highly principled person. What's been your approach to making sure you feel good about how things come to you?
I'll give you, this will be a long explanation. When I first started making things, I'd go to these markets and, I wouldn't sell stuff because let's say I wanted $120 for a ring that I put 3 hours into, but they could go buy the one from India for $30. So people would come to my booth, they go, oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Or my stone carvings. Wow, that's so unique. And I'd see them leaving the show with the $20 carving with scratch marks and everything in it, like mass produced. And it aggravated me so much. Compliments don't pay the bills, right? As an artist, that doesn't help. I realized if you can't beat them, join them. That was one of the major factors of why I went to India. And of course, in my head, I'm going, well, if I go there, am I exploiting the labor of cheap labor? So for example, India is like $1 an hour kind of thing. Like average wage for a stone cutter is 200 to $300 a month kind of thing. And that's salary based. I pay by weight, which is a way to be more fair to the cutters, because if they want to work more, they get paid more. But basically, I thought am I going there and taking advantage of them? And at some point I realized if I don't go there, they get none of my money, right? So by going there, I at least am supporting them in some way. And I've been in factories where they do like multi-million-dollar orders. There's one guy there that I've gotten to know. He was talking to me. When he talks, I shut up, right? Because his level of business is like biggest in the world. So when I hear him talk about the ethics behind what he does, because he's one of the top 10 biggest factories in India and one of the biggest in the world. So major jewelry companies come in, and there's other factories that have lineups of all the same machines, hundreds of workers under the same roof, right? They can meet any timeline. They can make every ring the exact to the precise measurement. So for marketing, it's all the same. So at some point, how do these major jewelry buyers pick what factory they're going to use? And they base it off the ethics. Do those factories have females employed? Is there a paid vacation now? So a lot of people talk about, oh, corporations are bad for the world, but those corporations in the jewelry industry are actually affecting how these other countries are changing the way they treat their employees, right? So for the ethics of how humans are treated, that trickles down too into the cottage industry, which is the word for smaller scale business there. So it's really cool listening about that, or listening and hearing him talk about those things. Basically, to get those contracts, they have to have good human relations with their employees. The other thing, the environmental aspect, I get asked this question, not often, but when I do, people ask, what about the harmful effects to the environment? And I say, okay, but you're asking me that with t-shirts that are made with heavy dyes in countries where you've got labor that's not slave labor, but you've got child labor and all kinds of things too. And you found my place on a cell phone that was put together in another country, with batteries that are using lithium that are being depleted with, so I'm it's a bit hypocritical to why do rocks have to be up on a pedestal and nothing else does, right? And I kind of explain that to them first, and they go, oh yeah, I see your point. And then I say, and just so you know, there's no harmful effects with crystals for mining in the environment. So I kind of then tell them that when you're mining crystals, you can't blast and you can't do large scale mining, because if you set off explosions, guess what happens to all those crystals? They shatter, right? Same with rough rock for cutting. You send fractures throughout the stone, so you reduce your yield of high-grade stone. So to mine crystals and fossils and things like that, it's pretty much all hammer and chisel. Sometimes they do small-scale blasting in tunnels, but they're not moving mountains. I've been to major mining company summits, and their slogans are, we move mountains, right? That's their caption when you're mining stone that you can crush up for ore, whether it's copper or gold or things like that. They're just crushing all the rocks. So they're just demolishing everything, right? Oil, you see what they do with strip mining, fracking, the scale of what they can do to impact the environment is so much bigger. Hammer and chisel, there's only so much mountain you can move. I don't know, I built dirt jumps as a kid. You can only dig so much hole in a day before you get tired. Some of these countries, it's pretty hot out. You can only do so much labor in a day, right? So the environmental effects are very, very minimal. Just because of the fact they have to go slowly.
You also mentioned before we were rolling, that you still go out hunting for your own stuff as well.
So people talk about this all the time. Why is this so expensive? Why is that so expensive? There's nothing ethical about paying me $1 for a rock I jeopardized my life for. I've had times, one time I was in this mountain in Colorado, and I was scaling the side of a cliff with a big drop, and I have a backpack on with my tools and stuff, and it's raining now because I stayed too late. Now it's raining. The cliff is slippery and I'm scaling it for my life. And that was when I realized I'm there's nothing ethical about making me scale a mountain and trying to argue about me over the price of the rock I got out of that. Especially like if you're trying to like argue from $3 to $2, like just pay me the money that it's worth, you know?
Yeah.
So even ethical mining locally, like for the labor force too, people don't realize, like I've stopped taking commission work in jewelry too, just because the ethics of, you know what, you make something for someone and like I'll do it well, it'll be nice, I know it'll never fall apart, I did exactly what they asked, and like, oh, but like it's more than I thought, and instead of 500 it's 600, and I'm like, yeah, but the craftsmanship was good, what I gave you initially was an estimate, I laid it all out for you. Like it's aggravating sometimes as an artist to deal with that. It's not just overseas and it's not just environment, sometimes it's directly to me.
Around that piece, like people not charging the worth of things. I've got this engineer and producer, and he was on the podcast a while ago, and we were talking about that challenge when you're self-employed and you're a creator. You know, so Jesse's an engineer and a producer. He helps mold people's music. People's desire for something super high quality is there, but their disconnect from it's super high quality and this is what I feel I should pay for that. There is a like insane disconnect between those two things. So how have you scaled that as an artist?
It's a management thing where you have to have everything laid out beforehand for the price, and they either take it or leave it. Like you can't surprise them with it later. You have to stay true to what it's worth too, even when you set your price initially. Like when I give someone an estimate, sometimes I go, well, it's probably only worth, let's say, $200, but for me to want to do the job, 400, because otherwise it's like, for me, $200, to be honest, like I can go stand in my storefront and make that in 10 minutes, right? Like I'll just wait there and someone will hand that to me. Yeah. So for me to go do a project for someone, I go, but for me to actually want to do it, like there's all these other factors. And so I have my price, and also it's a leverage point where I don't need the work. If they want me to do it, this is my price, and I hold true to that. And maybe it's an artisan thing where like, if people aren't paying your price, moonlight and something else. Like I have my value, and after so much abrasion towards it, I go, you know what? They're just cheap. Like that's what, and there's other people that do, I only do gold work, right? Because with gold work customers, they pay more, right? They expect it to be $4,000 instead of 400. If someone wants to do a silversmith project, they go, oh, well, in Mexico, they do it for $12. And like, no, I'm sorry. Like not what I do here. Go to Mexico, you know, and it's, yeah.
Well, it's something going back to Jesse. I think this is a really good point, which is like, because it's not just the doing of it. It's like, well, you want me to do it, and I've done this thing 100 times or 1,000 times or 2,000 times, you know, like, so for example, for me, there's only certain coaching I'll take on. And I love working with people. I love helping people, but like, I'm not in a place in my coaching career where I'm going to work with like a mid-level manager on their physical presence. And I'm just not going to do it. If someone came to me and said, we'll pay you this astronomical amount of money to do it, I'd be like, is it still worth my time to do that? Because yeah, like, you know, I want the company to do well. I want to do well financially, but like, is it even worth my time to do that? And am I even going to do a good job if I'm not that interested in it? Jesse said something I thought was so great. He was like, well, that's kind of like the life cycle of business though. It's like, as you kind of go up in skill and you can charge more, you can say no to a job, or someone can say no to your price, but then they just punt it down to the person who's a little bit more junior than you, who's still coming up, who wants to do it for that price. And it's a challenge for them. They're excited. And that's that kind of cool ecosystem of business where it's like the more skilled and the more you charge, you can go in that direction, but it also creates opportunities for a consumer or for someone coming up that can say, yeah, I'll do it for that price.
Yeah. I farm a lot of work out. People want me to do something like a ring for $110 or something. I say, no, this guy's a friend of mine that buys stones from my store. Go see him. He'll do it for that price. And I say, the craftsmanship's going to be mediocre, but the price is cheap. And then I write down another number and I say, these people are expensive, but it'll be top quality, right? Here's your options. And so, yeah, I get that. And definitely it evolves, right? Like for me too, when I I rented my first warehouse and I was trying to make bills. I did all kinds of jobs I didn't want to do because losing the warehouse or doing the jobs I didn't want to do, right? So like I started with, you know, recutting stones for the jewelry industry, doing jewelry repair, teaching courses. Like I hate teaching. I'm very, very good at it. And like I'll make a curriculum for you so you don't have to write things down, resource guides and everything so that you can concentrate better in the class when I'm teaching. I'll have all the tools ready for you, and I have the information, I know what I'm doing. I don't enjoy it because I'm at a skill level where everyone that comes to me is beginners and I don't learn anything new by teaching them, right? So it's unfulfilling. So I don't like teaching, but in the past, I did it because I needed the money, right? And now, like you said, yeah, I can say no to that, right?
When we took a quick break there, you said, "Hey, I want to come back to mining." So what did you want to mention about mining?
Yeah, you asked me like about the sites I've been to. So just from rock hounding, I joined that rock hounding group when I was younger, and they took me to sites in the beginning, and I learned a bunch with them. But then I started going out on my own, and I have another buddy like that's locally that I dig with in BC. We split gas money and stuff, and just it's just fun going out with someone, right? Now I travel a lot to US. So let's say there's a rock show in Denver. I'll fly to something like Wyoming, and then I'll just rent a vehicle there for a week before the show, drive around, go to all these different sites, and then end up at the Denver show and like unload all the rock I found. But I've been to all kinds of places now, like over 200 mines or so. And there some are mines where it's like a genuine mine where they got equipment and you're paying fee digs, so you pay by pound of what you take out of there, or you pay per hour to be using the site. Like there's a Sunstone mine in the US, you pay $200 an hour to be on the conveyor belt. There's Nevada, you can dig black opal, you pay $800 a loader bucket. And it's like gambling. They take a loader scoop out of the bank, dump it in front of you. You get the whole day to go through it. You get what you get, right? If you get nothing, tough luck. It's 800 US, right? So sometimes that's a lot, but it's kind of one of those vacation things where I'd rather spend money on that than I don't know what other people would do, like hang gliding or whatever they want to do, right? Like my thrill is going through that pile of rock.
I like that you went to hang gliding first. Who's hang gliding right now?
I was thinking beach, but I'm like, what do people do at a beach? Beach is free. But
someone hang gliding right now, listen to the podcast, is like, how dare you?
Everyone has their own thing,
Okay, so let's go to the store. So Monica and I have like two of our favorite stores in Vancouver, our Antique Warehouse, which is like right beside you, and then your store. And shout out to Antique Warehouse, homies, love you guys. We love going to both, right? So we'll go to Antique Warehouse and like we'll both nerd out hard and be in there talking, chatting it up, having a great time, get some stuff, and then we'll go over to your store. And Monica's nerding out and I'm just kind of like, taking it in. But what I'm taking in is the people interactions when I'm there. From a people interaction space, when I was a kid, when I was in college, I worked at a record store. And working at a record store was such an interesting thing for a kid taking psychology because people would come into a record store and be very often nervous because they didn't want like the record store guy to be mean to them or like make fun of the music, like Jack Black in High Fidelity. And I made it my job when I was like working at a record store was just to be cool to people and make people feel welcome and comfortable because it can be kind of scary like going to a record store and like you're in a place of culture and maybe you're just getting into music or maybe you're just like a little nervous that people are gonna like be rude to you. So whenever I'm at the store, at your store, I always take in like the culture there is cool. Like everything's super accessible. Everyone's really, really nice. Everyone's super willing to like answer your questions. You've created a really cool vibe at the store. Did that happen by accident or did it happen with intention?
It's what I would want when I go into a place. Like my appearance through time, especially when I'm in my grubby shop clothes, sometimes I don't get treated nicely or there's a stigma there, Every time I go through the border, I get checked, things like that. Even when I joined the rock clubs, I said a lot of them were really kind to me, took me in. There was a lot of other people that looked at me and they're like, what's he going to steal here? Like I deal with, because of my appearance, a lot of the controversy, and I don't want people to feel that way in my store. I also enjoy the thrill of like being somewhere you want to be. We're a destination shop, right? So people have driven there sometimes an hour, sometimes 3 hours. Some people see us online and it's, they live in the Okanagan, but they're finally in Vancouver and they make the time to come to see us, right? So there's this build up, they get there and they want to walk through the door and have an enjoyable time. It also helps with sales if they're having fun, right? But just genuinely, I don't want to go to a place where I'm stressed and I'm making like whether it's my employees or the customers feel like stressed or unwelcome. There's no need to, So definitely it's intent. Like even when I hire my employees, the big thing I go through with them is just be welcoming. Like that's a big part of their job. They need to know about rocks, but like that's about half of it. And the other half is just like being a normal person, like greet people. figure out whether they want to be left alone, and or if they're with a, if they're with a girlfriend, let them have their time with that friend. Maybe they're on a first date. Like, don't be there hanging out with them. Like, let them have their moments. If it's someone that has a lot of questions about rock, like, we're just there to facilitate, right? So people come in, the rocks sell themselves. We don't have to be salesmen. That's the beauty of it, is I tell my employees, if someone doesn't want to buy something, they don't have to buy it, right? Like, we have thousands of rock varieties in the store. They'll pick the one they want. If they're here to buy something, they'll find it. So I tell them not to ever push for a sale. And yeah, just be welcoming, inviting. And it's kind of one of those things too, where our atmosphere, 80% of my customers come from metaphysical reasons, right? So I get customers that are there because they've lost a loved one and they're finding meaning, or they're trying to find a way to talk to the loved one through a stone, whether they think it's going to help them connect through an ethereal way. They are dealing with addiction, like amethyst for centuries has been known as the stone that keeps people sober, right? As the metaphysical meaning. People come into that store, not all of them, but many of them, with traumas or challenges, difficulties. Sometimes it's even just a guilty boyfriend that cheated and they've got to buy a gift of jewelry, whatever it is, right? But not everyone is there to have an exciting time. So that's part of being open to the customers too, and just kind of guiding them through the store. So it's one of those things where you just free flow with the customers, and you have to have like that ability to be an extrovert, but also just to read people and what they want in there, right? So I look for that in the employees. Resumes, like, having been an employer for so long, people lie on their resumes. I see it all the time. Resume means nothing to me at this point. Like, I have to meet someone, talk to them. And because now I realize too, I got to hang out with this person all the time. And we have to agree on things. They have to respect my authority when I ask them to do something, right? Like, I have times, some of my employees think I'm curt because I come in and I give them short sentences of, I need this done, and I'm very directive, and I'll say, this needs to get done. It is a priority. This needs to get done. It is not a priority. I just need it done by the end of the day. And sometimes they say, oh, you're very condescending because you over-explain. But I've learned to over-explain, because if I under-explain, I come back and it's not done properly, right? And so now I say, yeah, but I over-explained to everyone. It's not you. I just tell you all this information because when I come back, I want to make sure the job is done well. And so sometimes I have to explain it to people, because a lot of my employees haven't been in the management role, and they don't understand that people will let you down, right? And you have to work with people. It's something that I don't have control over another person. I can just be there to facilitate for them. So not only do I want my employees to be sound and just their charisma, and I don't want them to be shy, so I need competent employees, right? So when I hire people, yes, it's something I'm looking for. Like, it's a key part of an interview with them, is I'm looking to make sure, as I'm asking them interview questions, are they giving me one-word answers? Am I having to pull teeth to get things from them? Do they know themselves well? If I ask them a personal question, like, is it one sentence, or can they elaborate on things? Can they guess where my next question is going? So I'm looking for all that, because yeah, a big part of their job is making that shopping experience fun for people that show up.
Heck yeah, well done on that. So you didn't have really like boss experience before, right? But you went from having a very small storefront, which is where we first met and like first checked out the shop, to having, did you say it was 6,000 square feet? And it's a serious shop. Like, anyone going into that, it would be like, holy, I did not expect this. And you had mentioned, or someone there had mentioned, you were moving into a new space. Like, I thought like double the size or something. And for any for audience who who didn't get a chance to see the old location, it was like just a small little place. It wasn't much bigger than the room we're in right now. Like, at least the storefront part of it.
600 square feet total, something like that.
So you went up from around 600 to 6,000. That's a huge scale up in terms of size, in terms of staff, like everything about it. So
bring on the challenges.
Well, I was going to say, had the business grown to a place where the business required that, or was there I'm going to shoot big and make it work?
Both. Like I said, I got that small storefront. I had art studios throughout the back of my old warehouse. Mm-hmm. But every time an artist moved out, I was like, great, more storage space. So I started filling all those storage spaces with rocks. And I was making enough in that small storefront to compensate the rent at that point. But it was just kind of like rock that I was buying. They're just sitting in boxes, and you can't sell it when it's in a box. I do wholesale and things like that and bring them back there. But it was getting to the point where you'd take one box down and another one would fall. Like, it was dangerous for the employees. You'd take one thing out, another thing breaks. And so that was getting stressful. It was difficult to like just find things. The store was small and we were selling so many rocks that like we were restocking almost like it was a regular thing every day to just restock shelves with items. Like, I think in 2001, when I do the math, I sold about 200,000 rocks, like
Wow.
units of rock, like
Wow.
units of rock. So, and some of that's wholesale, but it just like the amount of transactions we were doing and the volume we were shifting through, like, because before too, like I put all these art studios in the back with the hallway down the center. Now I was getting pallets showing up, like sometimes 8 pallets at once, and then 2 weeks later another 5 pallets. Like, pallets were coming in because we were moving maybe a pallet a week kind of thing, and I was, like I said, just reinvesting the money in rock, so I was growing the stock. And so we had to try and like we had to unload all the pallets and hand bomb it all through like the long warehouse because I couldn't fit the pallet jack through there and stuff. And it just got to the point where like it was too difficult to like logistically. I hadn't designed the business to be that big, right? Like, it was just one of those things where I looked at my cost per square foot, and then I was like, oh, it's a small gamble to take to do this rock shop, right? Like, it's not a big risk, but it just grew way beyond what I ever expected. And so I was like, hey, we got to do this better. And I started shopping around for other places. And then that storefront in the same complex became available, good visibility, easy move. I knew the landlords, I had rapport, like I'd pay my rent on time every day or every month for the last 3 years or 4 years. So when I asked them about renting it, they were like, well, there's a lot of people interested, but we'll give you 3 days because we like you. Like, I was one of their favorites. They're like, we'll give you 3 days to decide. And so there I had 3 days, and it was a huge commitment because before all my rent was subsidized by the artists and stuff too. So any money I was making was kind of just profit. People come into my store and they think my rent is, they'll be like, what is his rent? Like $2,000 or something? Like, it's add another zero, right? Like, so it's a big commitment for me to be like, well, like I'd have to make more money too to be able to afford all this. Like, for my expenses are going to increase, and then renovations, like I had money set aside for renos and stuff. Like, I think it was just the entrepreneur mindset where I was like, let's do it, like just jump in and just make it work. There's no failure until you accept failure, right? So I did it. And part of me too, like I went through all these challenges when I first started my business, like getting renovation permits and building permits for my initial warehouse. Nightmare, right? Like, I'll always have a bone to pick with Vancouver City because on their website it's like, we're here to help, and you call the Vancouver City Building Development Office, their greeting message starts with, we will not tolerate abusive language and blah blah blah. If you use that, we will hang up. Like that's not a great greeting to start with. But I had so many frustrations with them. Like, they cost me tens of thousands of dollars when I started my business. My old business had a wheelchair accessible washroom that I had to build there. If you go to old business, there's a curb out front without a wheelchair ramp, right? So they made me put a wheelchair accessible washroom in a building that doesn't have a wheelchair ramp, right? Like, all these things that just like would build frustration in anyone. Rent was expensive for me, and like the building inspector read the drawings wrong and made me redo the drawings over a long weekend. Took him another 2 weeks to read them again for him to just be like, oh yeah, that was on there the first time, sorry. And like, who do you think pays those 2 months of empty rent while I'm waiting, right? Like, I remember there was a moment where I was walking into the Vancouver Building Development Office. I was so frustrated. I wanted to go back to like my youth where I just wanted to throw a brick through their window. I'm like, maybe once a month I'll just go there, put a hood up, throw a brick through their window. Like, obviously I'm an adult, I know better, but I just had that much frustration where those were my intrusive thoughts of how I felt about the city, right? I got through it all. I'm like, I'm never doing that again. Never, like, because I tell people, like, I thought starting a business, like I thought there'd be expenses, but I never realized that many, right? It was like jumping in water with piranhas when I started my business, like all kinds of bills left, right, and center. So I was like, I'm never like doing that again with the city. That was the most expensive, most like, just horrible experience. Now I got to do it again, right? And on a bigger scale, right? So, and I got to do it during COVID when building supplies are 4 times as expensive. Steel, wood, all that is way more expensive. But I had to do it, and I had 3 days to decide. I did it. We did renovations, and of course, it took the city 4 months to approve my building permits. Something that happens, they were simple building permits. Other cities do it in about 3 days. So I'm paying 4 months of empty rent Again, $20,000, add that up for 4 months for just nothing, right? Just waste some money. People come into my store often and they say, wow, you're so lucky. And I understand they're saying like they appreciate the space, they're amazed. But the lucky part is like, I've been hospitalized overseas. I've had broken bones doing this. I've blood, sweat. I work like 12 hours a day, like compromised relationships, an employee quit. Now I'm having to cover them in the store. And like, so, and then in my spare time, I'm catching up on the admin work. I've had relationships that have been compromised by it, like people that I've really loved, and I've lost them. Family, like to be able to scale my business like I don't have family. I don't have like all those kinds of things that other people have in their life, right? It's a lot of challenges, and again, they're like worthwhile to me, and they've hardened me and all that. But it's something that I think if people don't own their own business or haven't invested like that into one, I don't think they recognize the commitment it takes, and the toll it can sometimes take on us. Like I said, like this morning, like yesterday, I'm dealing with someone that shoplifted, and it's almost like someone breaking into your home, right, and stealing something, and it's like having that happen multiple times, the invasiveness, just the disrespect of it, like having to deal with that, and then seeing another customer and wondering, are they shoplifting? Do I treat them that way? Like, how do I trust all the other people? Like all these things that you have to learn to overcome. And when people come in and say, oh, you're so lucky, sometimes I'm like, the financial stress, like I've had times sometimes where, like I said, I'm spending 6 figures on rocks, other times where I can't afford to put gas in my car because I spent too much on rocks and now I got to pay it all, right? Like, so all those things, sometimes I've had like rent, I've been like it's within like a few $100 of that check's clearing, like, so I have all those times too. And then I have times where I'll make a day where someone comes and spends 30 grand. I'm like, oh, back on top, like, so it's like, it's stress and all those things, like I said, dealing with disciplining employees. So it's not luck, but
Well, as we're tucking into the tail end, something of the interview, there's something I wanted to touch on. It seems like the business has really increased in notoriety. Like before, it seemed like kind of like this obscure little store kind of out by the airport, and suddenly it's like it's very present, and it's present in my life because I have lots of people in my life that like love the store and go there. But something that you mentioned to Monica in the pre-interview is that when COVID came in, all the money that you would spend in trade shows before, you pushed into advertising online, and that like opened up the floodgates basically.
yeah, it's funny because I hang out with people now and they go, oh, I think Google's listening to me because I was talking about this and now they're giving me an ad for it. And in my head, I'm going, I know how that works because I do it, right? So when COVID happened, it was one of those things where I just had like small rock shop and everything. And I didn't really have a lot of customers back then. I was making a lot of my money from doing trade shows. So I had a trailer that I tow around behind my car, and I go to rock shows, set up, and I make thousands of dollars there every weekend. I go back to my shop and kind of make things and deal with a few customers. All of a sudden, all the trade shows are canceled, but trade shows cost money, and markets and things like that, whether it's $200 or $700 for the weekend or whatever it is. Sometimes they're $1,500 for a weekend. All that money now, I wasn't investing in those markets. So I started just trying Google ads and Facebook ads, and that's really what drew a lot of people to my business. It took me a long time to understand the difference between marketing and advertising too. Like I was just thought they were like synonyms, but they are very different things.
Why don't you explain it for the audience?
Marketing would be like you talked about the culture of my business. You walk in, you're impressed, you have a good vibe. It's your logo, your branding, the feel, your Google reviews, what people say about you. And that's my general business. For the products, it's the marketing of like, oh, this is high quality, or I go, honestly, that one's made overseas, but the cost is right. Whereas the advertising is how I direct traffic to my store. The biggest factor in me making sales is traffic, right? Same with whether it's a trade show or at my store, the more bodies that roll through my product, whether it's online too, the more people looking at it, just statistically, the more likely I'm going to make a sale. Sure, good marketing helps with that too. That's how you increase that option. But if you have 1,000 people walk by your product, someone's going to buy it. You know what I mean? At some point, one of those 1,000 people is going to spend some money. So it's a matter of generating that traffic. So that's why people in business talk about high traffic areas like the retail sectors and stuff like that. I'm in a warehouse district that I renovated to be really nice. It was an empty cement shell before I did it. So I renovated it and made it a storefront, but I have to direct the traffic. I don't have people that walk by. Sure, word of mouth helps, but Google ads, Facebook ads, targeting them, understanding my customer basis of, looking at the logistics of my social media. Okay, females between 20 and 50 are the most active on my social media, like liking my posts. So I put a bit more money into targeting those people as customers when I'm directing ads towards them. Listening to the customers where they came from, like, oh, I stopped at the plant shop on the way here. Someone at yoga told me about this. Like, there's kind of a vibe that goes to the crystal world, meditation, yoga. Again, 80% of my customers are metaphysical. Where else might they go in life? Because I can target them based on their GPS. If they've ever been in another rock shop more than 2 times, I can target them for that. Or if they've used certain keywords on their IP address, I can target them for that. So I'm not just using crystal, fossil in my target words. I'm using the other rock shops in the town, or I'm looking at other things that they might have of interest. Ironically, it's a tough field because anyone in the world can like rocks. And I mean that like literally, like you can have little kids, you can have older people from all ethnicities, because it's Mother Nature and everyone can relate to Mother Nature. There's no pop culture in it or anything, which is a really cool thing about it too, right? Is you get people from all walks of life. We get people that are gangsters that are in there that genuinely love minerals. We get old ladies that used to be geologists. We get kids that want to learn how to be a jeweler, a gemologist. Like some kids are like 7 years old and they know more about some of the rocks than I do, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's sometimes tough for marketing, but you figure it out as you go on, the advertising. But that's really what drove more people to my store. And I think just picking minerals, like there's other rock shops in town, they sell beads or tools for crafting and they teach courses and stuff, but no one was really doing crystals, and especially high quality crystals. And I think that's where I flourished, to the extent now where I've talked to people that shop at my store frequently, and my store actually allowed them to get into the hobby of collecting, because before they go into every rock shop and it's all the same product, all the same thing. And it's challenging because, like rose quartz sells all the time. Amethyst, it's like a key seller. Like when I did the trade shows before and stuff, I'd sell the things I made and sometimes I'd sell them. But amethyst, the marketing is done. Every girl in the world knows what an amethyst is, or an opal, right? Everyone knows what it is, but no one knows what azurine is from Malawi or something, So as a business thing, it is actually difficult to be like, well, I'm going to take the unbeaten path and see if it works. It's a total gamble because there's no assurance. There's no models that say this has worked, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas people buy amethyst and just keep flipping it all the time, because amethyst, every person has an amethyst. It's a starter-based crystal. So buying those rare things, it was definitely a gamble. But it paid off, and people were into it. And it was one of those things where the market wasn't there, but I created it, right? By just keeping my business afloat and gaining the customers as they grew.
All right, so we're heading into the end of the interview. Whenever I do an interview, we always ask what we call the crucial three very difficult questions, and they get harder in scale as we go along, but they're usually kind of fun, kind of funny. Before we do that though, any shout outs, anything you want to say, you want to tell the audience?
Come to my rock shop, Rubble Rock and Gem, 250 Southwest Marine Drive. We're open every day, 11 to 6.
Excellent. And we'll put all the info on the show and the episode bio as well. All right, so you ready? Okay. Now, camera can't see this, but you're wearing no shoes. And you mentioned earlier, it's like I stopped wearing shoes. So is it true you went 5 years without even owning a pair of shoes?
Yeah.
All right. What has been the biggest benefit you have experienced as not wearing shoes?
Self-perception, probably. A lot of other people judge me based on it, and I have to anticipate what their judgment is. Sometimes I don't want to have to anticipate it, but the amount of attention I'm getting, I can't evade. I have to acknowledge it. Now I put shoes on when I walk around in public. The only reason I have flip-flops is so that I can avoid some of that attention. It's just too much now for me. But it gave me a realization of, how other people see me, and also how much that doesn't matter, Sometimes I'll do it to avoid talking with other people, but in my rock shop, my rules, I get to go to work, be who I want, wear what I want. Mm-hmm. Same with my employees. Like, I have no dress code, I mean, it's one thing, like when I was shoeless, like you go on a date with a girl and you gotta explain why you're in a restaurant without shoes. And then like sometimes I wonder, I'm like, did they have like sleep with a hobo on their bucket list kind of thing, you know? Like so it taught me to, I think, explain myself well. I don't know, like defend my actions and whether it's worth it or not. But yeah, that's just I think self-awareness, and it gave me presence too of just like when I'm in my environment, like just what's around me, because I don't want to step in poop.
All right, second question. You must have gotten this one many, many times. What's the most catastrophic thing that's ever happened as a result of not wearing shoes?
Stepped in a lot of poop. One time, 2 times I stepped in the same poop. Coming home from my apartment, I parked, ran inside. There's dog poop in the grass. I was like, oh God, stepped in it. Very next day, parked, went through the same dog poop, the very next day.
Oh my God.
That was probably the worst. But I've had all kinds of things. Like my feet are so callous now that I have glass in my feet right now that I know about, and I just kind of change my gait a bit. But it's a like mild irritant, but there's probably glass in like 3 places in my foot. I'll stop at some point and just pick them back out. But like the glass doesn't affect me anymore. I remember there was a time when I was going barefoot enough where I used to avoid, like you see a broken bottle on the street and you avoid it. There was a point in my life where I was like, I wonder if I can now. And I just, without changing my gait, walked right through like broken bottle on the sidewalk. And I got through it without glass like cutting me or embedding, and I was like, oh, I think I'm there, you know?
Whoa, man.
Yeah.
Wow, that's real fear factor stuff going on. All right, final question for you. So, you know, I've done some reading on like people not wearing shoes before, and just out of like just pure interest, because shoes weren't a thing. Like human beings didn't wear shoes for a long period of time.
Their foreign body, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, a friend of Monica and mine, she refers to shoes as foot coffins. And she's like, I'm really into sneakers. She's like, God, you have a ton of foot coffins. It's kind of like a fun joke between us. But I became really interested in like, there's a lot of benefits to actually walking around without shoes and like having your feet free of that. So just from like someone who grew up wearing shoes and at a certain point didn't, how did your feet change and adapt to being free of that to serve you in a different way or in a better way?
I never knew how much pinky toes affected balance. The way I was able to shift my weight differently, like in a shoe, if you look like your shoes, your toes are the narrowest part of your shoe. Look at my feet just casually.
Yeah.
What is the widest part? My toes, right?
Yeah.
So it takes away so much of your balance, like the ability to be nimble and shift things, shift your weight when you're walking through a crowd. And especially if you're attentive and watching where people are going to end up and stuff, you can really just guess. And sometimes you got to just squeak right past them. The ability to have that pinky toe is amazing. Sometimes I found too, like when I didn't wear shoes at all, I'd be at a curb waiting for the light to change, and my toes would just naturally find the edge of the curb and they just want to hang on there. Like not like a tree branch, I guess kind of like a tree branch actually. Yeah, they just always wanting to be grasped, right? They almost turn into hands again, like constantly feeling. It's like a free foot massage, all the different textures you walk on too. But people come in my store and they're like, oh, you're grounding. And I go, no, I just don't like shoes. Like I'm very sciencey, like the rock world, you know, I joke I'm like an apothecary that doesn't believe in his own medicine because everyone's there for crystal healing. And I sorted my whole store by chemical composition, right? So so people come in, oh, you're grounding. And no, I just don't like shoes, right? Like I just don't see the point. But it's also fun too, like winters sometimes, like walking in the snow. We're not like in the, I don't know, 19th century or 18th century where we're outside as often anymore. Like I'm driving places I go. So my time outside is kind of limited. If I'm going to be outside a long time, I'll put on shoes. But like even in the winter, if I'm just going to park my car and run into the shop or, you know, be putting gas in my vehicle, even if it's winter. I remember one time I was walking to the bus, and like back when I used to take the bus everywhere, I was walking to the bus station and like there's frost on the ground, right? It's significant frost and like it's cold. And I know when I get to the bus station, I might be there 10 minutes waiting. But when I get on the bus, my feet will warm up, and then I got to take another bus and wait and stuff and walk more. But I know, okay, max time I'm going to be out there like 20 minutes. And it's Canada, Vancouver. If I get really that cold, all I do is walk inside a business and whatever, right? Like I'm not going to die from it. But I like the challenge of it. And I remember this one time walking to a bus stop, frost on the ground. and just the life from that cold. It's like a cold shower. While probably people like that are jumping in a cold lake, like that, just shock to your nervous system. I remember thinking, like, I know why wolves smile now. Like, you see the crazy face on wolves when they're like, and they're outside in the wild, and they're like, I'm like, I feel like I understand that, because like, you know, everything's cold and you're just dealing with it, and it's making you hypersensitive to your surroundings, and it's like you feel alive, you know. And then you're looking at all these other people on their cell phone or got their headphones in, and you realize how dormant they are sometimes. And so just the engagement with my environment increased so much by being barefoot.
Amazing, man.
Yeah.
Such a cool story. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being on here. Any last words you want to share with anyone here?
Thanks for doing this with me. Hopefully I answered some questions you had.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone, please check out the shop. It is super awesome. And this is coming from a person who is not, that's not my passion. And I love going there because I think it's so cool. So with that, everyone, it's another episode of One Step Beyond. I'm Aram Arslanian, and we will see you next time. Mike, drop the beat.
One step. One